Next from Chicago, our contributing correspondent Jeff Berkowitz talks with Andrew Broy, the CEO of the Illinois Network of Charter Schools. Mr. Broy talks about the value of charter schools and why he is against a school voucher program. This runs about 30 minutes.
You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name, politics is our game, and we will be doing lots of politics. Well, in public policy, more public policy than politics, but you know, the lead-in for this was about Mayor Rahm Emanuel. Can he dig himself out of a hole? Well, we're taping the show on July 13th, and I knew I was going to get this wrong, but in the last year, in 2012 to 13, how many charter schools, new charter schools did we have?
Last year there were 12.
And this coming year there'll be?
This year, 15 brand new charter schools in Chicago.
And 15 students mean roughly how many students go to a charter school that weren't before?
About 500 to 600 per school, so that would mean 15 schools yields some
7,500?
7,500
And you got, folks, we don't want to get right in the weeds, right? But just think about this now. The big picture is this. Keep focused on the big picture. You know, Advanced Illinois tells us, the Education Reform Organization, Ms. Staines, the executive director there, that roughly 1 out of every 5 kids, 1 out of every 5 black kids to be specific, in 4th grade in the Chicago public schools, although it's going to be pretty similar with brown kids, and that's mostly the population, African American, Hispanic. 1 out of every 5 4th graders in the Chicago public schools reads at grade level. 4 out of 5 don't. That's an amazing statistic. And so you've got 400,000 students in the Chicago public schools, and you've got maybe 50,000, 52,000 in charter schools.
That's right.
You've got some other good neighborhood schools and some magnet schools, some select enrollment schools. But really, you got more than 300,000 students who are in trouble. Would that be fair?
I think that's right.
Yeah.
We have a real education problem in the city of Chicago, and the simple reality, Jeff, is there are not enough good schools. We're focused on creating good charter schools, but we want to see good schools everywhere in the city.
And you are president, Andrew, I should introduce our guest, Andrew Broy is president and CEO of the Illinois Network of Charter Schools.
That's right.
You've been there how many years?
3 years now.
3 years. So you are charged basically with keeping in touch with all of the people who are involved in charter schools, right?
That's right.
And promoting them. And would you like to see, if you could, in the next 5 years, if you could jump the number of charter school students from the 52,000 now to 150,000, would you like to do that?
We'd like to see many more charter schools, yes.
But would you like, if you could do that and you could do it well?
Oh, certainly.
You'd like to see 150,000
If we can
students.
do it well and serve students and neighborhoods at high levels, definitely.
But why? What is a charter school?
A charter school is a free, open enrollment public school that is freed from the constraints of the local school district. In exchange for that freedom, they're able to achieve at high levels. If they meet their accountability targets, stay open. If they don't, they close. It's very simple.
So it's kind of a market test.
That's right.
And although the people judging them, whether they meet those requirements, they're not the consumers, are they?
No, they're the school districts that
They're the
grant
school-
the charters.
Aren't they the competitors of the charter schools?
To some extent, although I prefer to think it as the charter schools exist to provide better options for students and to encourage the district to move and reform.
None of these public school districts, if they had their choice, would put in competition to it. So when you say they approve them, really?
They do. And Chicago's approved 119. So to their credit,
CPS. Well, CPS, in this case, it's different. See, this comes back. Basics, Civics 101. I know you're here to talk about charter schools, and we'll get there. But we got to give some framework. So if people just like dropped in from the moon and they don't know much about Chicago, they would know that Mayor Rahm Emanuel's been mayor for 2 years. And Mayor Rahm Emanuel, the mayor, okay, since 1995 and his school reform, in a sense, controls the school board. He appoints people to the school board. Now, they don't have to do what he says, but he has a lot of power that way.
That's right.
Right? So the mayor, at that time was Mayor Richard M. Daley, was given, in a sense, control over education, and the Republicans, many people said it was like a prank. They just gave him this power, thought he would screw up. Well, whether he did or not is another question, but Mayor Rahm Emanuel now has been there for 2 years. He's inherited that power.
That's right.
And in 2 years, how many new charter schools has he put in there?
He's put in 12 last year and now 15 this coming year.
What about the year before?
9 the year before.
9.
So 21.
20, and we're saying how many in each school? roughly?
500 fully enrolled, 500 to 600.
Okay, so that's about 10,000 students,
That's right.
new students into charter schools from Rahm Emanuel. The thing is, we said he has to dig himself out of a hole. He's probably getting very unpopular. He came in with the usual, what do we call it, honeymoon? People liked him, but there are all these flash riots, flash mobs going on Michigan Avenue, maybe in control now. But if you drive down Michigan Avenue on a Sunday afternoon, you see about like 20 cops every 4 blocks. It's flooded with cops.
That's right.
Okay, and it seemed to have the effect. The flash mobs and the flash riots go away. But he's got all these murders on the south side and the west side, and that got a little better because we had such a cold winter, right?
We did.
And the murderers don't like to go out in the cold. But you can't count on that. And fiscal, there's all these problems, but Rahm, we're going to give him a hint. If you were to dramatically increase the number of charter schools, which entails a lot of, we can talk about that, a lot of finagling, and charter schools truly are as good as Andrew Broy says it there, right?
Yes.
And you've got studies to back them up.
We do.
Then Rahm, you would get a lot of credit for turning the system around and infusing a lot of competition into the system, and then the traditional public schools, also known as TPS for traditional public schools, you'll see that acronym here, well, they would get better. People should remember, charter schools are public schools. Right now, we have traditional public schools, neighborhood schools, and those traditional public schools are kind of open enrollment, right?
That's right.
And then we have traditional public schools that are select enrollment, meaning kids get in there based on test scores and grades, and they don't let you in if you don't get a certain grade level. And then you've got charter schools. And those are the 3 major components. Have I described that right, of the Chicago public schools?
Most of the schools are in one of those 3 categories, yes.
And if you want to radically get education better soon, you got to get more charter schools for the reasons you gave. They are freed up from these regulations, these restrictions on how to improve the schools. And if they infuse Chicago with that new way of doing things, the traditional public schools have to react, or people keep trying to get into charter schools and they lose their market.
That's right.
That's the model.
Yeah, I go farther than that and even suggest that choice itself in the city, whether it's magnet school choice, international baccalaureate choice, charter choice, is good for the city. And the mayor has been very clear about trying to expand choice broadly across the city. We're a piece of that, but not all of that.
And the man behind a lot of this was a man named Milton Friedman. Not so much on charter schools, because he was known, here we are, Capitalism and Freedom here, get a shot of that. He wrote about school vouchers before this book. It's also in this book. This book was written about 50 years ago. We just celebrated the 50th anniversary, coming up on 51. So he talked about school choice and empowering parents. The idea being with a school voucher, we spend about $15,000 per kid per year in the CPS, right?
Yeah, that's right.
It's a $6 billion budget, roughly. 400,000 students. If you do the math, 400,000 to 6 billion is about 15,000. So if we were to do what Milton, actually he would say don't give as much. He might say not, if we were to take everything we're spending now, capital costs, operating costs, on CPS students, Chicago Public School students, and give it to the parents would be free to choose. This book, free to choose. They could stay in the public schools if they were satisfied, and the cash would stay there, or they could go to a private school. Out goes the kid, out goes the cash, and competition occurs. What you have is a charter school, and you're saying a charter is somebody has to come up with a charter and promise they're going to perform, and if they don't get to keep the charter, right?
That's right. And just this year, in fact, the district voted to close 2 charter schools that weren't performing well enough. We, in fact, supported that decision by the district because we think charter schools are about performance, not just about more. It's about performance and making sure students are served quite well.
So, but it is give people an outlet if they're at a bad school that's not performing.
That's right.
They can apply to go to the charter school, right?
That's right.
And now if there are more students that want to go to the charter school than there are slots, then what happens?
That's very often the case. And then they have to have a lottery by law in which each applicant has an equal chance of being admitted randomly in the lottery.
Okay, so a lot of people say that they start comparing charter schools with select enrollment schools. That would be kind of unfair Because in a sense, a charter school has to take anybody who shows up, right?
Well, it doesn't make
Within bounds, within bounds.
That's right. It doesn't make any sense to compare a school that sorts for academic performance in the front end through a test versus a school that doesn't. So we think the more apt comparison is a charter school to a traditional public school with no enrollment criteria.
And you've made those comparisons.
We have.
The Illinois network of charter schools.
That's right.
And what do you find?
We find that at the elementary school level, about 2/3 of charter schools outperform their comparison traditional neighborhood school in the same neighborhood. At the high school level, it's more like 70%. So it's between 65 to 70% of all charter schools in the city outperform their neighborhood peer.
And you have those lists available, right?
We do.
So, like, have you ever spoken with Alderman Bob Ferretti about this?
I have.
Now, he says there's no evidence that charter schools outperform traditional public schools.
That's what he says.
Has
yeah.
he said that to you?
He has.
And did you give him this evidence?
I did. In fact, we gave it to him, we gave it to the whole city council, and we put it on our website. Because we believe in transparency. So on our website at incschools.org, you'll see an online database of performance where you can look at any school in the city and compare performance. And you'll see that charter schools do quite well, but this isn't our data. This is publicly available data we've put in a user-friendly location on our website. So
Come from the CPS, essentially?
comes from
Chicago
CPS
Public
and the
Schools?
State Board of Education.
Okay. Now, what did Alderman Ferretti say when you gave him this data?
He cited selective enrollment high schools like Northside, Peyton, etc. And we said, again, if you're comparing it to a high school that tests its students on the income to make sure they get in, that's not the right comparison because we can't do that in charter schools.
Because you're saying it's like comparing apples and oranges. You
I'll
want
give
to
an
compare apples to apples,
I'll give an
right?
example. The incoming ACT test score at Peyton and Northside College Prep are on the order of 23 or 24. The average charter incoming is between 14 to 16. So if you judge them in 2 years on a test in 11th grade, we could grow much more in 2 years and still be below the students at Northside College Prep. And that's not because of what the school does, it's because the incoming student has a different profile.
You sort of want to say, what's the added value to the charter school? And you want to compare students with similar socioeconomic backgrounds at the charter school with the neighborhood schools, right?
Right, the question is, what effect does the school have on student learning? And you get the answer to that question by measuring how much learning occurs once the student enrolls.
Okay. It's kind of the concept, economists use this, of ceteris paribus, the Latin phrase, all things equal. Everything else
That's
equal,
right.
if you take the charter school instruction, you have comparable parents, comparable interests, comparable kids, and now you change the type of instruction, you change the curriculum, you change the incentives to perform. Do those kids end up doing better as a result of that? That's what we're really asking.
Definitely.
Do the schools do better? Do the kids do better? And the question is yes, and you've
Yes.
answered it that way.
Yes.
Okay. Now, what does Alderman Ferretti say to this when you tell him that?
He again cites selective enrollment schools.
Didn't you just say you just told him he has to explain to you why he thinks that is a relevant comparison?
The one thing we've noticed is that
I don't mean to speak. Look, Alderman Ferretti is a friend of public affairs. He's come on this show. He said he'll come on again. But I got to say, when I met with Alderman Ferretti and was on the show, I actually didn't have all this information available. So I'm just trying to get a sense, but we want Alderman Ferretti to come back and respond himself. And actually, maybe, Bob, you can come and sit down with Andrew and have a conversation, and I'll just be quiet and let you two guys talk.
I'd welcome that.
Okay.
One thing we find is that people that criticize charter schools often don't know what they are. And so we offer visits to charter schools to elected officials all the time. If they want to come visit a school, we'll arrange for it.
Like Alderman Ricky Munoz. Has he come visit? Because isn't he from, I think Ricky represents a number of Hispanics, right?
He does.
And I say that because there's this study we're going to be talking about, the CREDO study out of Stanford University. CREDO stands for?
I'm not sure what it stands for.
It's Center for Research on Educational Outcomes, something
right.
like that?
That's right.
At
Sounds right.
Stanford University, CREDO, okay. You're familiar with that study.
I am.
The link to it is on your site. I've gone to it. You can print out that.
That's right.
In essence, what's CREDO telling us?
So CREDO did a study this year. There was a follow-up 2009 study which tried to measure the growth in charter schools compared to the growth in traditional schools among the same types of students. So they pick all the charter school students, measure them on 8 different demographic criteria, find a virtual twin for those students in the regular school, and then track those students over time. The benefit of this methodology is that now we're not talking about incoming scores, but rather the same students, where they start off, and then growth over time. And so Credo did that and found that in a charter school, the average student learns about a month more of learning in a given academic year in math than the traditional neighborhood school for the exact same student.
That's in a sense, it's an advantage that charters have. When you say it's a month, is that for math?
That's for
'Cause I
math,
thought-
that's right.
So the advantage of charters over these comparable schools is kids get about a month more of learning per year in math.
That's right.
And on the reading level, they get about 2 weeks more.
2 weeks, that's right.
So like, if you watch a tennis match, you often see that phrase, advantage this person, advantage that. This is advantage charter schools, right?
That's right.
And that comes from this Credo organization. It's not Stanford. It's at Stanford, but it's not Stanford.
That's right.
But it's an independent organization.
That's right.
They do the study, and indeed, if you read through the study, it's not all. There are some things that are less robust than others.
Certainly.
And because they're reporting the data and the statistics as they see them.
That's right. And Credo has issued a number of reports in the past 5 years on charter performance, and they cannot be characterized as a charter-leaning organization. Right. I mean, they've gotten a lot of reports out there. This is pure data. And one thing we've said, if you took this question and asked, if we could implement a policy in the city that wound up giving to every student a month's more math learning gains in a year, whatever the program was, I think everybody would support it.
Right.
So the question is, why don't everyone support charter schools?
And what's the answer?
The answer is entrenched opposition among certain interest groups who don't want charters to expand in the city.
Would the Chicago Teachers Union be one of those entrenched
I think they're in that
interests?
category, yes.
Because they view this as a threat to them. If somebody goes to a charter school, not to a traditional public school, and if they can't make the traditional public school better, well then they start losing their jobs, as they're doing now when they're closing schools. They say for low utilization, but some would say also for low performance.
Yeah, we have to get out of the business.
The question is, do we care about, some people say they believe in public schools. I've never understood that. I would think they would say they believe in the kids in schools, and it doesn't matter whether it's a public school or a private school, as long as they're learning how to read. And especially remember, 85% of the kids in the Chicago public schools are low income.
That's right.
And probably in large part minority, Hispanic and black, right?
That's right.
So we're spending $15,000 per kid per year, and when the kid doesn't learn how to read, and 4 out of 5 don't in the 4th grade at grade level, it gets worse from there. They go on, they may drop out, and even if they don't, the question is, what are they getting out of it? Why aren't more people sort of enraged that people are not focusing on a statistic? I mean, like Ram, he's the mayor, right? Mm-hmm. I went to a park district thing. They had a thing, and they're starting summer, and there's a good program, and there's summer camps and all that. And I said, well, by the way, because they're going to do some teaching of reading at these summer camp things, not formal. Sure. And they said, have you thought of testing the kids before the beginning of the program, and then 2 months later after? Oh no, we're not going to do that. Wouldn't you want to know? I mean, inquiring minds want to know. And so, Ram, this big program that you have for summer camps and all, that's good. Okay, it's helping kids. They should have a camp. Sure. But if you can teach kids how to read at the same time, shouldn't we try it?
Sure, and if we could have a month more learning gains compounded year after year, imagine the impact that would have on students.
So there's this book, The Runaway Bunny, okay, by Margaret Wise Brown. Most people read to their kids and they read this book. Once there was a little bunny who wanted to run away, so he said to his mother, I'm running away. If you run away, said his mother, I will run after you, for you are my little bunny. And it goes on, if you run after me, said the little bunny, I will become a fish in a trout stream, and I will swim away from you. If you become a fish in a trout stream, said his mother, I will become a fisherman, and I will fish for you. So on and on and on. I give this as an example because a lot of parents read to their kids starting at age 0, so to speak,
That's right.
Maybe when they're 1 up to when they're 5. And I don't know if there's research that shows this, if we did nothing other than read to every kid 1 book a day, like this, The Runaway Bunny by Margaret Wise Brown, do you think we might have more kids reading at grade level in 4th grade?
There's no question
Yeah.
we would.
Yeah.
We know from research that about half the achievement gap occurs prior to age. So what happens between birth and age 6 is critical to long-term outcomes. If we could have that gap, we'd wind up being in a better place starting in kindergarten or 1st grade.
So in a sense, we know what to do. This is not a mystery. Infuse competition. Now, what about, I've mentioned school choice, school vouchers, I've mentioned Milton Friedman. We're taping this on July 13th. On July 31st, it's so-called Milton Friedman Legacy Day. That would be his 101st birthday, if he were alive today. Milton Friedman is the father of vouchers, okay? What do you think about school choice, school vouchers? I know your association is the network of charter schools.
Right.
You think it might be a good idea to have school vouchers, school choice?
So I certainly think that enhanced school choice done right makes a lot of sense. The question on voucher programs is always, where's the accountability? What is the accountability? I believe that parent choice is a portion of that, but not sufficient.
Not sufficient?
Not sufficient.
Why?
Because you need to have a system that measures whether students receive voucher going to whatever school they're going to or actually learning there.
Because we rely on competition for so many things. You know, like when you buy a car, it's pretty much your choice, right?
Right.
You can read the data, you can go to Consumer Reports, but we don't have an entity that says this is a good car and you can't buy the car unless we say it's a good car.
That's right.
We rely on your judgment. You're empowered, right? When you buy food, you're empowered.
Right.
When you buy hamburgers, you're empowered. When you go to a doctor, you're empowered. Consumer choice, free to choose, Milton Friedman. Why would education be different? Why can't we rely on the parents? Why can't we respect the parents?
We should rely on respect parents. What I'm suggesting,
Totally.
though,
No,
is
totally.
that
You say there has to be something more. The parents can go to test scores. The parents can read. The parents can get advice from a variety of advisors in the community.
Sure.
Why can't we? Why wouldn't you want to empower the parents?
We are empowering parents, but I'll give you this example. So there are a number of charter schools in the city of Chicago that are not performing well, regrettably. But the parents support those schools wholeheartedly. So just because the parents love the school is not sufficient to keep the charter if the school is not doing what it's supposed to.
You know what? If we said to each of those parents,
parents,
you got 15,000, and if you're not happy at that charter school, you can go somewhere else. I think a lot of them would leave. And if we gave them 15,000, okay, you know what? There would be entrepreneurs who would say, I want that money. If those parents have that purchasing power, I will tell them about my school. I will try to persuade them it's better. You would have all sorts of competition. You would have all sorts of innovation. It's like computers. It's like smartphones, folks. You know these smartphones? We had no idea what these things could do. But Steve Jobs had an idea. Lots of people had different ideas, and now they're facing competition. Apple's facing. Do you see my point?
I do.
We didn't have anybody saying, here's the certification commission. Until we decide that your smartphone is working, they can't buy it. But we do that with schools. I guess I just differ with you on that.
I think we do.
Okay.
But I would suggest that the charter experiment that we're doing in the country right now is showing that many parents will choose a school that is not making education happen for students because it's safer, because it's closer to the
And they
school,
don't have
etc.
full choice. If you had to open your own shoe store every time you wanted to go to a better shoe store and had a charter shoe store, it's not going to be very good competition. If you could just take your money that you're spending at the shoe and go to the shoe store of their choice, you would make better choices. Same thing with schools. If these people could just leave in a heartbeat, don't you think more people would leave?
I certainly think more people would leave if they had tuition tax credits or voucher programs or any other school choice
More
program.
competition. Isn't that what it's about? Freedom. Let freedom ring.
We believe in freedom in the charter sector for sure.
Yeah, because like all these schools that were closing, and there's been all this brouhaha and all this energy over the last year about closing 50 traditional public schools, right?
Yeah.
Involving 30,000 students. Yeah. Meanwhile, 300,000 students are in trouble, in trouble. And you could do something about it, Ram. You could go over to Andrew Broy. Have you spoken to Ram about this?
No, not.
Hey, Ram, would you call up Andrew Broy? Would you have him over and let him tell you about charter schools? And even though I may differ a little bit with him on vouchers, I think his heart's in the right place. You could tell Ram about this and collect together, you know, a collaborative project. Ram likes private-public partnerships, right?
That's right. That's right.
So you could do so much more. The mayor and you see, Ram, you could get all the credit. He'd give them all the credit. You don't care. As long as the kids learn how to read, you don't care who gets the credit, right?
Well, we need better schools. I mean, we're not in this business to get credit. We want to see more students educated in great schools in Chicago, and the problem is right now, there are far too few schools serving the needs of students.
And more choice.
More choice is part of that, certainly.
And more competition.
Yes.
And Okay, so, and
And there's competition among charters in neighborhoods. We have on the west side, say Lawndale, has a pretty high concentration of charter schools. And so they compete for students with each other. And that's a positive thing for the neighborhoods because the parents get more options and more decisions what schools work for them.
And these, according to the Credo study that we referred to, which people can get, again, by contacting you, go into your website. Where's your website?
It's at incschools.org or incschools.org.
And you can go there, find out the Credo study, click on the link. I did. Print out 50 pages, read it right there.
Yep.
And you can find out that the charter schools are erasing, they have erased the Hispanic learning gap, right?
Yeah, this is probably the most significant finding in the Credo study, and that is that when you look at just Hispanic and Latino students in charter schools in the city, they're actually growing at a pace faster than their white counterparts, without regard to income.
Okay.
And since Latinos tend to be in poverty at higher levels, it's a pretty dramatic outcome. So they're narrowing the achievement gap over time in charter schools.
And there is black poverty students. If you can stratify the study in a variety of ways, and one way you can look at the poverty students to find that black students who are poor, black poverty students in charter schools outperform traditional public schools in reading, right?
Yeah.
So you're making headway there. There's still an achievement gap, but you're making headway with the African American students, with the Hispanic students. So these, in a sense, everybody could benefit, high, low income, from charter school opportunities. But the major benefit, I think, these studies are telling us, are for low income people, for minorities, for Hispanics, for African Americans, right?
Yeah, the greater performance metrics are among the poorer students. So we're certainly creating schools where the need is most acute.
And so all these schools that we close, these 50 schools, if we said to all these students, you know, they're going from one school, many say, to another school that's really not much better, could you say, here, we got a charter school for you, come along with us?
Certainly. We've got 15 new ones opening up just this fall, and many of these parents who had students displaced because of school closures are going to choose charter schools.
They are. It said the CPS told them about this choice.
We have, certainly.
You have, but
Yeah.
CPS didn't.
Yeah,
CPS didn't, but you
CPS
did.
has.
They have?
And we've taken
Okay.
calls. We've got a website,
Okay.
we have a school finder on our website, so there are different ways you can find out which charter schools are enrolling students.
So like ROM could have like a charter school day, right?
Well, there's actually an expo.
Is there a charter school day?
Yeah, there is. We call it the expo in the fall, and it is at Soldier Field.
Don't wait till
where-
the fall. No, July 31st would be an excellent day because that's Milton Friedman Legacy Day. So ROM could declare that Milton Friedman Day, okay? Choice Day, helping low-income students day, helping Hispanic low-income students, helping African-American low-income students. And, you know, like Laura Washington was all upset about UNO and about Juan Rangel, okay, because of the conflicts. And Laura's a friend of public affairs. She's come on several times. I invite you, Laura, to look at this study because I know you're concerned about African-American kids, especially in impoverished areas, and Hispanic kids. And I wonder if Laura Washington became convinced that charter schools were really helping Hispanic kids and African-American low-income kids. And Laura Washington wrote as much as he was writing about Juan Rangel and how much of a problem he was for UNO. Can you imagine what that would do?
Well, certainly. And what I find interesting is there's no real debate that African American and Latino parents are choosing charter schools. They are, by the thousands, and on waiting lists by the thousands.
Who is choosing charter schools?
African American students and Latino students.
Okay. So it's their choice. Sure. We're going to continue to speak as the credits roll, but I very much want to thank Andrew Broy. He is the president and CEO of the Illinois Network of Charter Schools. You can find out more about that organization by going to incschools.org. Incschools.org, right?
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.